Hello. After doing all those opening videos, it occurred to me that I hadn't talked about how to play against all the openings other than 1e4 and 1d4, which are, of course, the two most common. Um, so, what else could be played, and what do you play against it? Well, actually, what else could be played is almost everything. Almost every first move, I think, has been played in a proper chess game to try and get the advantage as white, or at least try and trick the opponent as white. The best and the most common ones include the English opening with c4, the Resi-Barkta system with knight f3, but all the other pawns have been pushed. We see g3 and g4. We've seen b3 and b4. We've also seen uh, perhaps lastly that I might do today, f4, and there's also knight c3 might be worth a look. I mean, everything else I think will probably not be a problem or transpose into something that you already know. So speaking of what you already know, if your opponent allows you to do it, I mean, there's no reason not to put your pawns on d4 and d5 and e5. Let's look at it from black's point of view. Um, on d5 and e5 and expect to get, there's no reason to think if you get both of those moves then you aren't equal. Some complications may be around, but that's usually a good bet. And you must have something in mind to play against the queen's pawn opening with d4. And whatever it is that you play against that, you can probably play against all these other openings. So, for example, if you know a system with d4, like the Swiss defence, I expect you could set up a Swiss defence style opening, and it would be all right. The Similarly, if you play another opening which I've recommended, which has got you can get into from the d5 system, if you play the Stonewall Dutch with f5 and d5, you can probably play that just as well against c4 as a start move. You can play f5 and carry on as usual and expect to get an okay game. Not necessarily without that slight white advantage that we usually see in chess, but at least an okay game and probably easier quality against most of the others. So if you know something and you can play it, let's just play that, and that may be enough to get you through most of these other openings. But I will say a few more things about them. Let's do the odd ones first. For example, 1 to g3. I mean, I don't think there's any reason not to play d5, and if your opponent will let you, follow up with e5, and that as I suggested earlier, that should be about an equal game. The only move not to allow you to play e5 is either d5 when you can play d4 by white when you can play your normal anti-Catalan system, or knight to f3 when we have some sort of King's Indian attack. It's not they usually get into it this move order with knight f3, d5, g3, and now knight f6 and bishop to g2. And black's got quite a range of systems here that they can play. I mean, c5 looks okay. Bishop to f5 is a very well-known system. c6 is an okay move. Bishop to g4 is an okay move. If you want to play your solid Swiss defence or something like it, just play e6 and after d3, bishop e7, castle, and there's no reason to think that you won't be equal in that position. The thing that may happen to you is after knight on b to d2 and e4, if white is allowed to get away with carrying on with e5, you're in a sort of a French defence type of position. If you play the French, that's okay. If you don't play the French, then you may want to find a different way of handling those first few moves, but even that is okay to play as black. White will try and advance on the king side. You just shove everything forward on the queen side. See how you get on with that. So that's knight f3 and g3. While we're over on that side of the board, there's this crazy looking move g4, which is a little bit of a trap. d5 is very natural. Discovered attack from the bishop onto the pawn there. Whoops, missed. From the bishop onto the pawn. And white will probably allow you to take it with playing bishop to g2. Now, if you do take it, there is white will play something like c4 and follow it up with queen to b3. And I mean, maybe this is equal, but you're under pressure. You've fallen for white's trap, such as it is, and that may be uncomfortable. I think just avoid white's main idea. Play something very solid like c6. And now white's got a problem on the g4 point, and will have to spend a move defending it, either with h3 when you can play e5. As I say, if you play e4 and d5 and e5, there's no reason to suspect you won't be at least equal. And so that's after h3 e5, after g5 e5 again, and now there's another discovered attack, this time from the queen onto the g pawn. And after h4, I expect h6 is quite a good move. And after d3, just take, and nothing from white here is really satisfactory. To take back on e5, g5 with a pawn, you take the rook, and you can develop around that pawn rather nicely by moving your bishop to d6 and your knight to g6, and I think you're at least equal in that position. That's really quite handy. If they take back with the bishop, then they're going to have an isolated h-pawn all game, which is not comfortable. So that's Grob's attack, as it's known, and I don't think too much of a problem. A similar sort of system, b4, the often called the Sokolsky or the Polish opening, or sometimes called the orangutan, after a coinage of Tartakova. The main line is okay. e5 with a discovered attack, bishop b2, both bishops take a pawn, and knight f6, and black's okay here, I think. I mean, this is the main line, and white will know it better than you, and white will get this position quite often and may know some ideas that you don't know. You probably won't meet it very often, and even though it's theoretically equal, it might be a little bit hard to remember. The line that I like to play, which may be as unfamiliar to white as the whole thing is to you, is to play c6. And I've had a game many years ago in Thetford where white continued blithely with bishop to b2, this sort of extended fianchetto, and after a5 white played a3, I played takes on b4, takes on b4, takes on a1, takes on a1, and now queen to b6, developing the queen and attacking the b pawn. Obviously white doesn't want to play c3, defending the pawn and blocking in the bishop, which will probably pull a sad face if I know anything about bishops. So my opponent played bishop to c3, but after knight to a6, sadly discovered that they were losing a pawn, and so I won the pawn and won the game, and that was a nice way to start a game of chess. It's not quite right for it's not all forced, that, of course. I mean, c3 is a move. Perhaps before that, white could play after a5, they could play b5 and hope to make something out of c takes b5, e4, b4, and you've got this kind of messed up pawns on the queen side with a hole in it on b5. I mean, that can't be worth a pawn for white, so you're okay, but maybe under a little bit of pressure. Another way to approach the whole thing, recommended I think by Richard Palliser in his Beating Unorthodox Chess Openings book, is to play on move 2, queen to b6, and now a3, a5 can lead to the sorts of positions we saw earlier, where black's threatening to win a pawn after something like c3. In fact, white's got a little trick here, playing c4, and after a takes b4, c5. Now, if you take back on c4, c5 here with the queen, which looks very natural, then a takes b4, and your queen is attacked, and so is your rook, and you're going to lose material. So don't take the pawn on c5 when they push it. So a takes b4, c5, just drop the queen back to c7, a takes b4, takes, and now b6 or d6. I think d6 is a little bit better, helping your development. And I mean, an odd position, but you're at least equal here as black. I think what white's going to struggle to show that their opening idea's got any force at all. Now you've got and what white may face some problems on holding their advanced pawns together. They've certainly spent a lot of moves moving pawns without a lot to show for it. So that's the Sokolsky opening, or orangutan, or the Polish opening. B3 is another idea. The Nimzo-Larsen attack, as it's sometimes called, or Queen Fianchetto opening. And the system that I like is to play e5, bishop to b2, and now knight to c3, and white usually continues e3. Now the main line of this goes d5, bishop to b3, bishop to b5, bishop to d6, and what you're under a certain amount of pressure here with your e-pawn after a move like f4. I mean, not the only move for white. I think c4 might be as c4 might be as good for here for white. But after f4, if you obviously take on f4, then your g pawn goes, and that's going to be bad. And if you try and support the pawn with something like f6, or maybe queen plays a check, or just queen straight away to e7, white's got some ways of increasing the pressure against your centre, and maybe they're not so comfortable for you. It feels like you're defending, and again it's the main line that white will know very well, and even if it's theoretically okay for black, you might not want to have to prove it in a game. So the system I recommend after e3 is just to play quite quietly with d6, and you're going to put your knights out, and if white plays something like knight to f3, then you can poke it with your e-pawn, which would be perfectly okay. White usually plays something like bishop to b5, and after bishop to d7, I think really white's spent again some moves trying to put pressure on your game, but your game has no pressure on it. There are moves like you can play a6 and hope to pick up the bishop pair, and after something like knight to e2, which white might try, black's got moves like queen to g5. One of the advantage of holding back this knight on g8, queen to g5 can be really rather awkward for white to meet. So there's a nice simple system for you. There was a terrific game between Minassian and Mickey Adams from Cornwall a few years ago, which I remember very well, and rather converted me to this bishop to d7 system. And I've had this in a club game, and in fact white was so worried about getting into any of that, they actually played d4 here, but after e takes d4, e takes d4, d5, clearly black's got an okay, very sensible position, but I do wonder what this poor bishop is doing on b2, pulling a little bit of a sad face, I expect. not got the nice open view that they hoped for. So that's how to play against that system. The Nimzo Larsen attack. Getting towards the end of the list now. F4, Birds opening. Richard Palliser, again, I owe this idea to. I mean, the system against the Polish I knew from Tim Harding from many years ago, but D6 I think is a nice idea here. And for example, if knight to F3, which is the only move I've ever had played against me, bishop to G4, E3, E5 now for black, H3 takes, and C6, and you're going to put your one knight on F6, you're going to put your other knight on D7, play bishop to E7, castle, and it's really not clear what white's got to show for it. You have given up the bishop pair, but you've got really very good control of the centre to make up for it. White's queen can be poked about a bit, and if white's not careful, you may get a big check-in on H4. So this is quite a good system, and at least equal, and scores at least equal for black. Perhaps the move to be more afraid of, at least when I was considering it, was E4, and you think, oh my goodness me, we've been tricked into playing some funny system against an E4 opening that we don't usually play. But I think you're okay here. I mean, if you know a system like the modern with G6, you can play it, but I don't recommend those for youngsters particularly. But the trick move here, which I think is a bit of a discovery, is D5. We're going to play it like a centre counter, the Scandinavian defence, where in this position white's got an extra move, but they've used it to play this rather weakening move, F4, and it's not clear why white would want to play that move, and it doesn't help development, and it's not got too much to say about the centre. So black might be already quite equal here. Another way to play it for black, which I quite like, is to play knight to F6 rather than getting the queen exposed. And white might be tempted a little bit to play C4, E6, and now takes and takes, and black's just got terrific development already, and white might get into a terrible mess with their king stuck in the middle, because you can play bishop to B4 and castles, queen to E7, and it may be that white's in some trouble. I've seen Ray Shepherd, who used to help me look after the junior club in Exeter, win some terrific games with this sort of thing in the Scandinavian defence, and more like a Scandinavian attack. Wonderful games he had, and so this is quite a good gambit if that's your attacking style. Very much recommend that. Knight to F3, C5, just to nail down that d pawn a little bit, and white's really overstretching what they can get away with here. I think black's at least equal, even though white seems to have an extra pawn. It's not really about the pawns at the moment, it's about development, and black's development is better. So so that's the birds opening. So that really leads us back to the English opening, which is the most serious try in all this. And again, if you want to play your standard Stonewall Dutch or something, or your Queen's Gambit declined, you can play here E6 and D5 in that sort of move order, and then white will play perhaps D4, and then you can carry on as usual. If white's absolutely determined to not play the Queen's Gambit, well, it's a bit hard to know what else they might play here. G3 is almost certain to lead to some sort of Catalan style opening, not and again your standard development with knight to F6, bishop E7, castles is okay. Worth learning a little bit more as you get better at chess, but that's okay. But white can try and avoid the main lines of all of this by playing b3, which is either a Reti or an English opening, depending on how you look at it. And white has to play this sort of move order if they don't want you to be able to take on c4 to any effect. Obviously that's not so good now. And but if they continued by playing g3 much earlier, you may have been able to play takes on c4, takes on c4, and queen to d4, forking the rook and the c pawn. So only this move order is okay for white. So b3, knight to f6, g3, bishop e7, bishop g2, castles. Castles is all fairly standard. And now for black, I don't know why you wouldn't want to play something like c5 here, or d4. My computer keeps wanting to play that move. But play c5 rather, and if white plays something like bishop to b2, then d4 is an attempt to try and block the bishop out of the game. E3, knight c6, and now black will want to follow up with e5 at some point, hoping to block white's pieces out of the game. If we play takes, and rook e1 now for white, I mean this is all still perfectly possible to play. And now perhaps the best plan for black, I think, as if I recall, is to play knight to e8, and your idea is to play f6 and e5, and you've just got a nice big centre, and white's bishops, although they're sort of looking pretty, really don't control the bishop on b2 particularly looks a bit squashed, and so this is quite a good system for black, and well worth playing. So a lot of the top grandmasters will know and play this system against this Reti opening, which is not too threatening. So I think that's most of what you'll meet. What have I forgotten? Oh, there is this just one more opening that you might try. I mean, all of these are fairly standard, but knight to c3, whatever you fancy playing really. But so e5 is all right. Some of the main lines start off with d5, and now e4 for white is trying to tempt you to play d4. I mean, why wouldn't you be tempted? But after something like d4, this bishop is going to be strong on this diagonal. So instead of d4, maybe just take, and you can play knight to f6 here, or maybe it's even better to play knight to d7 first, and then either knight will come to f6, challenging that knight which isn't supported at the moment. And I think black's got pretty easy equality here. Bishop to f5 I think is okay as well, a little bit like the Caro-Kann, but you haven't put your pawn on c6. You may be able to move it to c5 in one move instead of in two moves as you do in the Caro-Kann, and again I think you ought to be at least equal here. But anyhow, however you like to play that one, I think will be all right. Right, I think that's the lot. Sorry, it's taken rather a long while to get through, and I'm also sorry. There's a lot of detail here that you may not get to use very often. So come back and watch this video again if you do meet some of these funny openings, and maybe watch it once in a while just to remind yourself of some of the ideas. If you start to meet them, or start to meet players who use them at all often. So there we go.